Did you get a little tired of watering your garden this summer? If so, you might want to think about adding a gravel garden to your landscape. We'll hear all about them today on Garden Talk. I'm Jill Nadeau. Glad to have you with us. Jeff Epping is back with us. He is the former director of horticulture at Old Brick Botanical Gardens and continues to run his own design and consulting business. He specializes in eco-conscious designs for projects ranging from small home gardens to expansive business campuses. Gravel gardens have been a passion for him for a very long time, and he has a new book out about it. It's called The Gravel Garden: Visionary, Drought-defying, Naturalistic Designs. What would you like to know about creating one? Have you visited one? What are your thoughts? Give us a call with your questions or observations. 800-642-1234 or send an email to talk@wpr.org. Jeff Epping, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thanks for having me. It's been a while.
It's been way too long. You sort of just disappeared on us, Jeff. I was like, how do I get a hold of this guy? But I heard from Mark Dwyer that you had this new book, and so I was very happy for him to put us back into contact. So what decided you on putting this book together?
Well, that's a good question. I was exposed to gravel gardening, back in the 90s, visiting Beth Chatto in England.
When you were 10, right?
When I was 10, yeah, something like that. And I was enamored by it, but, I thought, cool, it sounds like it's a good idea, because she was worried about water. We're using too much water in the garden. And then come around 2006, Roy Diblick, a good friend of mine at Northwind Perennial Farms, put a little gravel garden in at his place, and I saw it, and I thought, all right, maybe I should think about this. Mm-hmm. So I didn't do it right away. I wanted to see how it turned out for him.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and after a couple of years, I said, okay. In 2008, I put in a gravel garden for Epic Systems. And then in 2009, our first one at Old Brick, and then proceeded with three more, so four at Old Brick. And, after a couple years of gardening in that concept, I was blown away by how easy it was, how little resources had to go into it, from water to mulch, fertilizer, all those things I didn't need, like I did in my other, beds or borders. So I thought, this is something I need to start spreading the word about. So I gave some lectures. We often gave garden tours at Old Brick, and I always hit up the gravel gardens, and people were fascinated by it. So yeah, I just kept spreading the word, and it came to be my most popular lecture of, probably 20 I gave at the time. And so, and then, I don't know what year it was, but a few years back, American Roots, a beautiful book written by Nick McCullough and his wife Allison, and my garden was featured in it, my home garden. And Nick said, Jeff, every time I give the book lecture and show your garden, at the end, I have the most questions about your gravel garden. He said, you need to write a book about that. And I said, oh, yeah, when I retire, I'll do it. Well, I left Old Brick. I didn't really retire, but I left Old Brick, and I thought, okay, it's time. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out to Teresa Woodard, who I worked with many times at Old Brick when she would write gardening articles for different magazines, and Bob Stefko was often the photographer. So those two teamed up with me to put out the book, and it turned out really well. Came out this June.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. It really is. Even if you have no intention of putting in a gravel garden, the pictures are amazing. The ones that I really appreciated were the bird's eye view. I don't know if you took them with drones.
Yes, we did.
Because, we've seen the plans before where you've got the little dots. This is where this goes, this is where that goes. But you never see them actually when things grow. And so by having that view, you really appreciate the design factor.
I appreciate you saying that, because I couldn't agree more. Mm-hmm. When you see that top view, then you see all the other views, you can put it all together and see how it all lays out. Mm-hmm. And so we tried to do that in each garden, but, the government doesn't let you fly a drone next to Iowa State's stadium where we filmed Anna McCracken's beautiful garden, designed by Kelly Norris, one of the most outstanding gravel gardens I've ever seen. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Bob is an amazing photographer.
Yes.
Teresa, a great writer. So we teamed up and kind of co-wrote it together. And Teresa ended up putting a little gravel garden in at her place as a result too. So so she's all in, and
she came over to the dry side.
That's right. It just isn't hard to do these days, right? Oh.
No. Well, like I said, when I started out, I mean, I have watered more this year than I think I ever have in a garden, just because it was so dry. It was July into August, right? It was dry here.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's still dry up in the northern part of the state, but
yeah. And actually, the last several years, our summers and falls have been very, very dry, and it's caused a lot of our plants to perish.
Yes.
It doesn't happen right away, and so people don't realize why things are dying, but it's often because of these crazy dry and hot. How hot has it been lately too? So yeah, and what a lot of people don't know, and I encourage anyone to do a little deep dive into aquifer depletion. Just type that into a Google search wherever you're at, and read about what's going on, not only in Wisconsin or the United States, but around the globe. Our aquifers are in peril, and so we need to change our ways, because scientists believe that, like, the Ogallala Aquifer could be dried up or unusable for drinking by 2050, maybe 2080 if we're lucky. But we can stop that if we use our water more wisely. And with climate change, I think we all want to do something, right? And one way we can help is to create gardens, get rid of some lawn, which we have so much in this country. And it's, of all the things in your garden or your yard, the lawn is the least contributing to the environment. It really offers nothing for insects and birds and all those things. And then we dump tons of energy in the form of water, fertilizer, fuel, all those things. So give up a little of that sunny patch of lawn, put in a gravel garden, use a bunch of native plants, because most of the plants that we use here, which are super well adapted to these dry conditions, are our native prairie plants. And of course, it depends on where you're at in the world, but there's always plants in your region that will work well.
And that's the point, right, is that you don't use a specific kind of plant. It's the ones that are native to the area where you're putting in the garden.
Well, you try to use as many natives as possible, but honestly, I don't use all natives. One of the things I'm very passionate about is that if I'm going to create a garden for somebody, it needs to be beautiful, because they are not going to give up some space. They're not going to give up some grass if they're putting something in that they feel isn't. The money, time and money. So the gravel garden, I try to have things in bloom through the season. So starting out with bulbs. Actually, bulbs do very well in gravel gardens because they're native to dry, gravelly, mountainous regions, most of them. And so they do fine in the summer, just baking in that soil or being dry in it. And they do well. So I can get real early spring color, and then I can use other native and non-native. But really, the prairie plants, most of them bloom when we get a bunch of heat. So that early part of the season, I might depend on more non-native plants. But I try to do as many as possible. I'm sure everybody has heard, or if you haven't, check them out, Doug Tallamy, telling us about how important native plants are. And even he says, if you can do 70% native in your garden, that is really doing a great service for all the wonderful creatures that live around us, or could live around us if we create something for them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's kind of the philosophy then. So you have to have, typically the plants that we use are deep-rooted, drought-tolerant perennials, things with big tap roots, like pale purple coneflower is one, baptisias or false indigo is another name for that. All these plants that have these deep root systems, and that's what takes them through these drought periods without a hitch.
So we probably got people interested in it. So let's just talk about the basics on it. So when we say gravel gardening, we're not talking about like big chunks of rock, right? We're not talking about that horrible landscape rock that we see in front of buildings. We're talking about tiny little gravel, right?
Yeah, it's like quarter-inch size or pea gravel
Pea
size.
gravel,
You know, I often use an angular gravel because it kind of holds together better if we put paths through. But pea gravel works great, and we're not talking about just a dusting over the top.
Right.
Right. We're talking about 5 to 6 inches. Some of the gravel gardens that we featured in the book, we featured 20. Some of them have layers of 12 inches of gravel, and they're still, the plants are doing fantastically. So I find that about the 5-6 inch range is good for us. And the gravel we use is a washed gravel. So that pea gravel is a washed gravel, right? Every particle is about the same size. Quartzite is the other one that I use. It's angular. Every particle is about the same size, even though it's angular. So think of marbles in a jar. You can shake and push, do whatever you want. You're never going to get rid of that airspace in between those individual marbles. And that's what that gravel does for us. So it maintains that airspace, which cools the soil below. It's a great insulator. It's dry, so there's no amount of moisture in there. And then the plants thrive in that. And it is a very effective barrier to weed seed invasion. Okay, so a seed lands on top. It has to send a root all the way through dry gravel to the soil below, which is pretty tough. However, it does happen from time to time, but 9 times out of 10, if not more, it's the plants that are already in your gravel garden because they are super drought tolerant, and so they are adapted to those types of conditions. Most of our weeds are sort of agricultural, based weeds that like high fertility and lots of moisture, so they really don't, they're not a problem. Now, will we get a few weeds? Yes, because if you're familiar with a plant like an aster, a dandelion, a goldenrod, the seeds float through the air. If they land right in the crown of an existing plant and we have a wet spring or whatever, they'll probably germinate. But each spring, we go through the garden when we clean it up, and you can see those. As all the plants are emerging from their dormancy, you can see those little weeds here and there. You pull those from the crowns right there, get rid of them when they're easy to pull and get out, and you're good for the season. So, it's sounds too good to be true, and I thought it sounded that way too. And then I tried it, and I'm like, all right, this is great.
I like that you tried it on other places before you put it in your own yard, because your yard is actually a gravel garden now.
Well, I would have put one in sooner, but my wife had other thoughts. But when our front garden got torn up by a street renovation project, I said, all right, now's the time to do it. And she was like, all right. And she had seen others at that point. So she was like, oh, these are pretty beautiful. And that's the thing. This isn't, if you look at the book, you'll see these amazing gardens. And when I think of gravel gardening, it doesn't sound very wonderful.
No, it
right?
sounds like cactus.
Yeah, it sounds dry and boring, but these gardens are as beautiful as any other.
Yeah.
In fact, if you plant densely, like I tend to design my gravel gardens, you don't even see the gravel except
on the path
in the early, and in the early part of the season. But also the gravel can be kind of a nice negative space, and a couple gardens in the book, like Sean Conway out in Rhode Island. Oh, it's an amazing garden. He likes that gravel look, and I agree, it's beautiful. So
we're talking about gravel gardens with Jeff Epping. His new book is called The Gravel Garden: Visionary, Drought-defying Naturalistic Designs. If you have a question about what a gravel garden is, or maybe you've seen his over at Old Brick Gardens, give us a call, 800-642-1234, or you can send us an email, talk@wpr.org. So if anybody wants to see them, really, Old Brick is a good place here in the southern part of the state, or if you want to travel down here, because the gardens are worth seeing anyway. But they've been in for a long time. I even have one of your pictures that we talked about this about 8-9 years ago, I think, and you sent me some of the pictures. Yeah. And so I have one up on our website, wpr.org/garden talk. If you want to see a picture, you will not think that there's gravel involved, other than you may see a little bit of gravel. But let's just start. How do you start? We've got someone here who's really interested and tired of watering. I want to do something for the environment. How do I start?
You bet. So find a nice sunny spot. They don't do great in shade. Most of these plants are want to be in full sun and dry conditions. So find a sunny spot. Then you need to create a border around the garden. And that is because we have that 5 to 6 inches of gravel all the way to the edge of the garden. We want to maintain that. If we just let it fall out, we're going to have all sorts of weeds around the edge, right? Because it'll go from nothing up to 5 to 6. So, oftentimes you can use a walkway, or a sidewalk, a driveway, foundation of a building. In my case, at home, I use the curb on the street for one of my soils. You need to do that, and that's about 8 inches or higher, so that when you put the 6 inches of gravel, it retains in there. You don't want it spilling all over, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you get rid of the existing vegetation, however you want to do that. If you want to put down cardboard to kill it, if you want to use a chemical like glyphosate to get whatever it is you want to do, eliminate everything that's there. We don't want anything like quackgrass or Canada thistle or something like that, because the gravel won't hold that down, right?
No.
So that's got to be done. Put the gravel in place, and then we plant it.
So do you remove any of the soil? Or do you just
no. So we just build So typically we would get rid of that vegetation. Oftentimes now I don't even rototill anything anymore, because that works up more seeds and ruins the structure of the soil. So you can just leave that down. No weed, barrier, no fabric, anything like that, because right? I'm often asked that question. And then we put the gravel in, and then planting is super fun. You just kind of put a good pair of gloves on, dig like a dog, and set the plant in there and push the gravel around. We're not even digging into the soil below. We're just setting the root ball on that, and then it'll root into.
So you want the roots of the plant. Now, you mentioned in your book you want these plants to be, the pots to be about 4 inches. Is that right?
Typically we use like quart-sized pots, or 4.5 inch, 3.5 inch, somewhere in that range.
So the roots are pretty much close to where the soil starts.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. They're usually about 4 inches or so, maybe a little more. But if you've ever planted something in a pot, you know that the roots go down to the bottom and they start circling around.
Yeah.
So when you remove the pot, just kind of take off any loose soil. And I always take off on any container plant the top inch, because that's where dormant weed seeds will be waiting for you to water them and get them going. So get rid of that. And then you have that root mass, and then just kind of massage that, and you can easily get it to the 5 to 6 inch range. So when you put it in there in the hole, boom, it's it's good to go.
And do you use gravel then over the root?
Yeah. So the crown of the plant is at about what it would be, if it were just in normal soil. So the crown is at the surface of the gravel, and then the root mass is in that 5 to 6 inches of gravel, and the roots are touching that soil below.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Yep.
And I'm assuming you really should have a plan to where you're going to put these. You don't just say, okay, I've got 50 plants here, I'm just going to kind of scatter them.
I mean, that's just a design thing, right?
Yeah,
so you don't try to get every plant in the world. You don't need 100 different plants in 1,000 square foot, a small space. So some repetition. So I always lay them out first, in the pots on top of the gravel, but don't let any soil spill out. And when you plant, and I said you peel off that soil, do it over a bucket or a bushel basket. We don't want to contaminate the gravel and create organic matter within the gravel, okay? Because then we are allowing the weed seeds to have an advantage, because that's what they need, that moisture. So you keep that real clean. And then after you plant, you water. Now, I'm telling you, we're planting these because they're drought tolerant, and they are. But any plant needs some time. It needs to root in to that soil below. So in the first week or so, you're watering them as if they were still in a pot. Okay, it might be every day, depending on when it is, but just spot water. You don't need to do a ton. And then as time goes on, you just taper them off. And people always say, well, how much, for how long? And I said, just look at the plants. Always look at them first thing in the morning. If a plant is wilted first thing in the morning, it needs water. If it's not, may or may not. Because plants, even when they're have the moisture they need, they might wilt in the heat of the day in full sun. Okay, so anyway, you'll get a feel for that if you're a gardener. And then you just wean them off of the water. And then in year 2, you might water if we get some, severe drought periods. But then in year 3 and beyond, I haven't watered my gravel garden at all.
Nice.
So that's the beauty of it. Now, the one super important thing you need to do every spring is clean the garden up. Okay, and so you remove all the material. And I always do it in the spring because in the winter, the birds are coming in. I have finches eating the seeds of my compass plants and my coneflowers and things. So, and it looks nice, right? But in the spring, I want to clean it up. So I remove all that. I cut back to stems, leave about 4 to 6 inches of stem. We're learning from ecologists now, right, that's good for insects, especially bees. They will use those hollow stems or even pithy stems to create a nest and produce the next generation. Mm-hmm. All of the material, I used to, take it to the compost site, right? I don't do that anymore because, again, we know that all these insects, be they eggs, larvae, maybe even adults, are living in that plant material. So now I take it, I cut it into about, 18-inch sections if it's longer than that. I make bundle of about, a foot across or so, and I just place those in other parts of my garden. Not the gravel garden, because that's just a small portion of the overall garden, but I tuck them behind shrubs. I do, along my fence line, under my hemlock trees, put them all over the garden and let the insects that are in them release, right? They'll come out at the appropriate time. Mm-hmm. Some early, some later in the season, and then that material becomes part of the mulch for the rest of the garden.
Sure.
Yeah, and again, ecologists tell us we need to be messier gardeners. We're too crazy cleaning every little thing up because that's where the insects live.
Yeah, it's the truth.
Right,
I mean, my philosophy has always been what happens in nature. Because obviously, nature's been doing it for a long time, so they're doing something right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That, the campaign "Leave the Leaves."
Yes.
And because all the wonderful insects that we love, like fireflies, they need wood in your garden. Yeah. They need all these things amongst all the other insects. Yeah. So, but in the gravel garden, I got to clean it up. Yes. I got to get all the organic matter out. So I cut it all back, remove it, usually wait a few days. I have a battery-powered blower. I go through and blow everything else, the little pieces out. Then I'm good for the season. I'm good. And then, and then I just enjoy the garden for the most part.
So, but during the summer, if branches from a tree nearby or whatever blow in, you just take those out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you might want to tidy up the edges and stuff. So there's a landscape architect at Michigan, University of Michigan, by the name of Joan Nassauer, and she did this big study on people's perception of these messier native gardens that everybody's creating. And some people just can't wrap their head around that sort of, it's not everything in its proper place, mulch in between every plant, blah, blah, blah. And so she showed images with a hedge around a native planting or a strip of turf or the edges and the pathways, making sure you clip everything along, nothing falling in, just what she calls cues for care, or very formal plants in your garden, or sculpture, or something that shows that it's a cared for space. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I do kind of clean up, especially the street edge. Things, flow out into the street. If they're in flower, nobody has a problem with that, especially all the dog walkers. They love it. But after it's done flowering, then I might have to rein it back in a little.
Sure,
but I try to do that as little as possible because, again, seeds are important to the birds and to other insects that eat them too. So I try to keep as much as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about, when we come back after this break, about you working with an HOA, because there's a lot of them around and it can cause a lot of problems. So we'll be back in a little bit, but we are talking with Jeff Epping. He's the former director of horticulture at Old Brick Botanical Gardens, and he's got a new book out. It's called The Gravel Garden: Visionary, Drought-defying Naturalistic Designs. If you've got a question, please give us a call. Open lines, 800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. This is Garden Talk. I'm Jill Nadeau. We're talking about gravel gardens with Jeff Epping. Coming up at the top of the hour after the news, we're going to talk about diseases that may be appearing on your fruit plants and trees. And then in the last half hour, we're going to talk about growing bonsais. But we're taking your questions and comments now about gravel gardens. The number 800-642-1234. And of course, you can send an email, talk@wpr.org. And let's go to the phones. Deborah and Racine, go right ahead.
Hi. I have a kind of a weird question. So we're doing a bathroom remodel. We are doing it now. We gutted it. And whoever did this bathroom back probably, I don't know, like decades ago, because we live in a historic house, put a whole ton of concrete, like laid a ton of concrete in the bathroom. So we've had to break it all up into all of these small pieces. And I have a whole bunch of buckets of this kind of gravelly sand to kind of golf ball size piece, like refuse of this concrete. Can I reuse this for a gravel garden? I have a little space in between my garage and patio that I'm like, could I do this? But so I wanted to get your opinion on that.
No, that's great. That's great. In fact, that's another type of drought-tolerant gardening designs that people are doing, especially in urban areas, bigger cities. They're using construction rubble, be it from, porcelain, concrete, old bricks, all those things, trying to reduce their carbon footprint by keeping them close by and not hauling materials long distances. So, yes, there are people doing that. It's really hard to say without seeing exactly what you have, but I would say maybe mix in some sand with those pieces. You might want to top it off with a pure layer of say pea gravel or something, because if you use just sand on the surface, it'll be a little easier for weeds to get going in there. But if you have that really well drained mix and have some little crevices in there for things to get rooted in, I think you'll have some success. I know some people who have done a little bit of that, and they're having a lot of fun with it. And some, to be quite honest, I looked at the beginning, I thought, oh my God, I don't think this is ever going to work, and I was completely wrong. And they're beautiful. So again, though, you have to select the right plants, right? You got to have things that are going to thrive in those drier conditions. What direction does that space face? Is it south or
yeah north? So that's
good.
Yep, that's the issue. It actually is north facing, so it doesn't get a lot of light, and it's a little strip. I was thinking like a Carex albicans or something, maybe.
Yeah,
like
there's a lot of sedges that are super drought tolerant. Even some non-native plants like epimedium might work, but yeah, just some of the native asters like Aster divaricatus, which is it's a different genus, Sympiotrichon, I guess, or Eurybia. Anyway,
I wasn't going to correct you, Jeff.
The woodland asters. There's a lot of plants that are really drought tolerant, and because it's in that northern exposure, they won't be as dry as if they were in the southern exposure. So you might have to do some experimenting. I encourage you. There's a gentleman from England. His name is John Little, and he's all over Instagram. Check him out. He does all sorts of cool stuff with exactly what you're talking about, construction debris, and he's does a lot of little video clips too. He's fun and super knowledgeable.
Okay, well, good luck, Deborah. Go ahead and experiment. What's it going to hurt, right? Yeah. Now, does she have to worry about creating some of the bigger chunks that she might have crevices and things that dirt falls into that she has to worry about?
Yeah, I would probably, I don't, it's hard to say what it looks like, but I might break it down into a little bit smaller pieces, because, the roots will find some of those little crevices might be good, but if they're big, solid pieces, you probably won't get much rooting into that.
Okay, get some of your frustrations out, Deborah. Crack it up. Thanks for the call. Let's go to Amy in Cambridge. Hi, Amy.
Hi. Hello. I have a question. I was trying to visualize when you were talking about starting one of these gravel gardens. And am I understanding that it's a bit of raised? Are you kind of building it up a little bit?
I think you kind of cut out there, but I think what you're asking is that do we go up? So the soil, you don't have to remove 6 inches of soil. You actually just create the border 6 to 8 inches higher than the existing soil. Now, if you have an existing sidewalk or curb like I did at my house, there I have to go down on that edge 8 inches. And then I slowly bring that to grade into the bed. So I'm not removing 8 inches for the whole garden. I'm just getting that 8 inches down, and it can be slightly slanted going back into the bed. Take that soil and just throw it back into the bed that you're creating the gravel garden in, and just rake it all out smooth like you would with any other garden before you add the gravel. The other thing, when you add the gravel, be careful that you put stakes about every 2 feet through the space. Mark that 6-inch mark on each stake, because when you spread the gravel, it's so easy to have 2 inches here, 10 inches there, whatever. But if you do that, you'll get it consistent, and those are easily, pulled out after the fact. So anyway, but it's fun just to give it a try. So if you have a small space, like I have between my driveway and the foundation of my house, I have like 2 feet facing south. Perfect spot to give it a try. And you'll probably end up putting the bigger one in later, because you'll be like, oh my God, this is too easy.
Although moving gravel around takes a little more muscle than you think. So just be warned.
True.
And in some cases, you actually will put a border in. I mean, I know I've seen some of those pictures where there's like maybe some rocks or whatever.
Right. You could use landscape, like brick. So, some of those are really big. We did that out at Epic. Actually, that's what they use for their edging. You can use boulders. You could use, and any sorts of things, or even steel edging if you want to do that.
Just to kind of keep it contained. That's the important part.
Yeah.
Jenna emailed us. She said that she doesn't recommend concrete in the garden because cement mixtures typically contain coal fly ash, about 30%, which may have contaminants like arsenic, mercury, aluminum, stonium, uranium, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And that's what these designers in the urban areas are up against, right? So, believe it or not, in England, London, they have certified recycled material that is free of those contaminants.
Ah, nice.
In Chicago, where I've been doing some work with, not so much. So that's what we're kind of trying to figure out, how we can recycle these materials without, causing other issues. Right?
So don't put vegetables in there. Sure.
Right.
Not that you would, but just saying, excuse me.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Jenna. So let's talk about some of those other things in your book, because you do have a lot of examples, and you're going all over the world, mostly to Britain, but in the United States. But let's talk about that HOA first, and that is a home here in Madison, and it was in an area with a homeowners association with lots of rules. And the owner wanted to put in this garden in memory of his wife. So tell us about that.
Yeah. That was a couple years back. Mike called me and said he and his wife Linda had been to one of my gravel garden talks. Since that time, they moved into a new home in this neighborhood that's heavily HOA regulated. Sadly, Linda passed away during COVID. Mike wanted to create this garden in her memory. And the first thing he said is, I am not the gardener. Linda was the gardener. Yeah. But this sounds like, I could do it. And I said, okay, we can. And then I said, where are you at? And he told me, and I'm like, okay. Well, the first thing we need to do is pitch this to your homeowners association. And I said, I'll be happy to do that. I can, do a little presentation, show them images. I could come to Old Brick, whatever, because I would really like to do this for you. And he said, oh, I got it. I'll talk to him. I said, okay. And then, so he did, and he had a conversation. And at the end of that, he said, so what do you think? Are we good? And the president said, absolutely not. No way. And so Mike, being a very smart guy, he said, send me the covenant, please. I want to look it over. So he and I did. There's nothing in the covenant that said that we couldn't do what we did. There's some setbacks. We couldn't do anything on the parkway. Heights of plants needed to be 3 feet or less. All things that we could easily do. And so we did. We created the garden. We actually worked with the lawn care company that mowed his grass for him, because I said, I'm too old to be doing, all that heavy work. And so it was fun. It was fun for them. It was something different. Mm-hmm. And, when they were all said and done, they're very proud of what they did, and the garden has turned out beautifully. And what is so fun is that the book, the very front cover, is Mike's garden, the guy who's not a gardener. And we featured a lot of fantastic gardens in the book and gardeners. And this is the one that made the front cover because it is so beautiful. And within 2 years' time.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. 2 years' time, it looked like $1 million. Yeah. And believe me, there were a lot of people sort of like cocking their heads as they walked by, like, what are these guys up to? And then, 2 years later, people were stopping and thanking him for putting the garden in and providing all that beauty and all the butterflies and birds and such that utilize it. It's pretty cool.
And that was another one of those overhead views where you can see that compared to all of the other homes in the area. It's like, oh my gosh, what a difference.
Yeah.
I can't believe it didn't inspire other people in the area to do something, even if it was just a little. But
Right.
Yeah, and he said it was way easier than he thought as far as the cleanup in the spring went, too.
Yeah, so, Mike's up there in years, like I am too, but he gets a little help cleaning up in the spring now, but then the rest of the season he's good to go. Yeah. I mean,
so
it's fun.
There's, there are probably HOAs that may be a little bit more persnickety, but, you can work with them, hopefully.
And I think that's changing.
Yeah,
I've heard from
right.
a lot of garden designers around the country. I go to a lot of professional, conferences and such, and most of them are starting to loosen up because they, everybody understands what's going on out here with climate change, and it's getting harder for us to live in this heat and dry conditions. But think about all those insects and birds and mammals and all those creatures having to deal with this and with shrinking habitats as well. So we need to, create gardens that support them. And this type of garden does, which is great.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk a little bit about how these kind of gardens are used in cities, because you have a number of examples in the book also.
Yeah, we have a roundabout, actually, and I've always thought those would be the perfect place.
Yeah.
And we're getting more and more and more of them, aren't we?
Yes. I have no problem with them. I am actually pro roundabout. I know it's controversial, but...
I'm there with you. If I don't have to stop, I'm all for that.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's Swarthmore College in a suburb of Philadelphia, Swarthmore. They created a new sort of downtown space, put in a big roundabout, and wanted to, make it beautiful. So the college horticulture team put their heads together and ended up putting a beautiful gravel garden in the middle, and then a lot of the parking lot island beds and such, they converted to gravel gardens too, which work out really well. So the only issue with creating a garden like that in an urban space is, especially not as much there, but here in Madison, our streets are treated with both salt and sand. Okay, and sometimes the parking lots are as well. So if we create a bed like this, we just have to be cognizant of trying not to pile snow up into those beds. There's usually lots of other opportunities to push the snow somewhere else, because that sand will start to fill in the pore spaces. So a good example of that is at Goodman Pool here in Madison. Years back when I was still at Old Brick, we put in some nice parking lot island beds there that 10 years later still look fantastic. And, they're not getting a ton of care. They're getting no supplemental water, and they're doing beautifully. And there's, again, pictures of that in the book. We also did an old fountain at the Madison Water Utility building, just on Olin Avenue there near the pool. And I remember when I got a call asking if we would be interested in helping him do it. I was like, what? I don't know about this. And then I went over and looked. I was like, oh, we should give this a try. How many derelict fountains are there in this country? And,
too many, unfortunately.
yeah, and he was faced with, jackhammering the whole thing out and, starting all over, which was take a lot of energy. Now, these gravel gardens are absolutely gorgeous. And, and not to demean the crew that works there, but they're not gardeners, right? They are just maintaining the landscape, which was, a lot of grass, hedges, that sort of thing. And they have taken this garden and done beautifully with it.
And let's face it, most municipalities just don't have the money to take care of these things anymore.
Exactly.
So it makes sense.
Yep.
We got a call from Vicki in Eau Claire with a question. Go ahead, Vicki.
Hi, my question is, we have a pondless waterfall feature, and so there's elevation and uneven ground. Is that something that you can put a gravel garden around?
Yeah, you can create one as long as it isn't super steep. Okay, so like a 5% grade should be fine. Out at Epic, we actually created, because out at Epic, it's pretty cool. The gravel garden is on top of a parking structure that holds 2,000 cars underground. And so this is a very shallow soil profile, about 12 to 18 inches maybe. And we actually created topography by using foam and stuff. So you can have some of it, but not so steep that the gravel will start to migrate on a heavy rain or something like that. If you have a steeper slope, then you're better off terracing it, right? So to create levels that wouldn't be quite so steep. So yes, you could do that.
That sounds interesting. I think that would look really, really neat. So good luck with that, Vicki. Take a look at the book. It'll give you some really good ideas about plant combinations and colors and whatnot, because part of the book is you do have this like the little squared off areas where you picture the gravel, because there's different colors.
Yep.
And you also recommend trying to get gravel that is like native to the area,
right, locally sourced, so you're not spending because the gravel
it's heavy.
It's heavy, it's cheap, but you got to get it from there to your home, right? And that's what costs you the money. And it doesn't make any sense to be hauling stuff halfway across the country. Basically, the gravel just needs to be, similar dimensions. And again, you look at the book, you'll see all the different types of gravel people are using. And it needs to be hard. It need not a softer stone that will break down over time, because
you don't want to do that.
Compromise the system. But it was fun. In the book, I like to think that there's so many beautiful photographs in it that even someone like my wife, who isn't an avid gardener, she loves gardens, appreciates them, could pick up the book and enjoy it.
Yes.
And then under each of the photos that you see, which there's over 600, there's captions. And so they describe what's happening in the photo. They're bringing across a lot of technical information that you can, take it or leave it, whether you're a gardener or you're not. So there's just, a lot of great information. Like you said, there's gardens in Iowa, Philadelphia, Illinois, Chicago area, and even one way down in Nacogdoches, Texas.
Yeah, that was one I was surprised with Texas.
Yeah.
But that really makes sense in Texas, if you think about it. And so many in Britain who, someone who's not really traveled in Britain, I always think, the lovely cottage gardens, and it's green. And it's like, wow, they don't have a lot of water there? That was so interesting to me.
Well, it's like everywhere right now. Record temperatures in England and Spain and forest fire all over the world. So things are changing in a big way, and more gardeners there are looking to these drought-tolerant solutions. And one in particular is amazing is Knepp Castle. There's several books on the whole story of Knepp and how they're converting an old farm to a more naturalistic landscape, all the animals that are coming in as part of that. And they had a small croquet garden and a swimming pool in a walled space, and it didn't fit into what they were doing there.
But it's a castle.
Well, they blew it up and they created a dry garden, and they tried several different types of gravel and different mixes. But it's amazing. And what they do there is they monitor every creature, every insect, mouse, mammal,
Oh
birds.
my gosh.
And they're doing that in the gravel garden as well, and finding like an amazing abundance in such a short period of time. It's only, I think, like 5 years old.
Wow.
And it's a really neat story. And again, it's in the book, and go on Instagram or your social media or whatever,
Sure.
and check out more. But it's it's something that's making sense all over the globe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when are you leading the gravel garden tour?
I'll have to put that together.
Yeah, you should put that together.
For sure.
I'll probably sign up for that. So I wanted to talk before we have to let you go. So you've had your garden now for quite a few years in front of your house. Do those plants have to get, divided? Do some of them just die out because they're getting older? I mean, what if you find one you really want to put a new plant in? How do you do that?
Well, that's a good question. What's interesting is that when you traditional garden, fertility is very high. Mm-hmm. In fact, a lot of researchers show now that we're making the fertility way too high in our gardens, which make it even harder to maintain because the plants grow faster than they want to or should. They hollow out in the middle, and so then we don't like them because they don't look neat and tidy. But in nature, you mentioned earlier, I like to look to nature, right?
Yeah.
Who divides perennials in nature?
Nobody.
Nobody. And so in the gravel gardens, it's lean and mean. There's not a lot of fertility. We don't fertilize. Plants grow at the pace they want to grow at. And so, the garden, first one at Old Brick 2009, plants are still there. Some things come and go. We've learned a lot of which plants do better than others. Mm-hmm. Something like purple coneflower is short-lived. It's really not a prairie plant. Pale purple coneflower is, and that lasts for a long time. So we've learned some things there. But as nature goes, sometimes you get voles, those little meadow mouse that come in, and they'll work below the snow line in the winter and literally take out, plants. Yeah. So it's still gardening. It's not. It's not a miracle. It's not like interior decorating where you set it up and you walk away and it stays the same. So it's still gardening. But and you say replacing plants. Well, I can never leave well enough alone with my garden because so I do take some things out because I want to try something new.
Sure.
Because I always want to keep learning myself, but I wouldn't have to.
Yeah. What do you do with your old ones, Jeff? Because
I have a big family.
There's probably a list.
I never have a problem getting rid of them. Let's put it that way.
I'm sure you don't. Okay. Well, again, I really think anybody that's interested really needs to pick up this book. It's called The Gravel Garden, Visionary, Drought-defying, Naturalistic Designs. And it's Jeff Epping and, I'm sorry, your co-author?
Teresa Woodard and Bob Stefko is the photographer.
Yeah. And like I said, even if you're not really interested in doing one of these, pick it up. Take a look at it, okay, because you're going to enjoy it because it's beautifully designed. The pictures are amazing. And I would guarantee by the end of it, you might be interested in putting a little one in a corner somewhere. So you probably would be. What's next on your agenda, Jeff?
Oh, people say, when are you going to write the second edition? No. And I said, it's going to be a while. A book is more work than I gave it credit to be. But it was a lot of fun, and I'm proud of the way it turned out. And honestly, I don't think I'm going to get rich writing a book, but I really wanted to share this information because I really think it's important with the way our climate has changed and will keep changing. So we all need to look to better ways to garden. I'm not thinking that everybody's going to convert their garden to a gravel garden, but a portion of it maybe, right? And then look at the rest of your garden and think about how you can make it more drought tolerant for the good of Mother Nature. We need to help this planet out.
Yes. Well, it's nice to have options. So thanks so much, Jeff, for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jeff Epping is the former director of horticulture at Old Brick Botanical Gardens and continues to run his own design and consulting business. He specializes in eco-conscious designs for projects ranging from small home gardens to expansive business campuses. Again, the book is Gravel Garden, Visionary, Drought-defying, Naturalistic Designs. We'll be back after the news. Growing your own fruit is a special pleasure. So when something doesn't look right, who can blame you for getting a little concerned? This is Garden Talk. I'm Jill Nadeau. Back with us to take your questions about fruit disease is Leslie Holland. She is an associate professor and extension specialist of fruit crop pathology in the Department of Plant Pathology at UW-Madison. How are your fruit crops doing this year? Do you need help identifying a disease? Are you wondering how to prevent one? Well, give us a call with your questions at 800-642-1234 or send an email to talk@wpr.org. Leslie, thanks for being back with us.
Hi, Jill. It's my pleasure.
I'm so glad you were able to make it. I mean, we couldn't get all three of you fruit ladies together, so we kind of spread you out, but that's okay. We're going to focus in on that plant disease. How's it been this year for you? What's the year been like in disease?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jill. Well, every season's a new season, especially in Wisconsin. But yeah, this year's actually been fairly disease intensive, I would say. I think we had a pretty unusual spring, as I'm sure you remember, with hot and cold, a little bit of rain, and now we're getting some later season rain. So as a pathologist, it's been a great season for me. I think folks growing fruits might feel a little different.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Good for you, not for the people who are trying to make some money off of it. Because usually you work mostly with the farmers, right? And then you also work for extension for homeowners too.
Yes.
Okay.
So large scale operations all the way to just something in your backyard.
Mm-hmm. So how have the crops been though for those that are producing?
Yeah, I think so far we're still a little ways out for harvest for most of them, but I think so far it's been looking good. I know some folks suffered some freeze damage early in the spring, and so that's brought some yields down for folks. But in terms of disease, I think we still have a few things to see as we kind of head into the next month or two, but I can certainly say the humidity this year and then some of the warmer temperatures made things quite conducive. So we are starting to see both foliar diseases expressing as well as some fruit diseases, both in the orchard and vineyard spaces.
So what we've got, apples and grapes coming up. Those are the biggies.
Yeah, those seem to be the big ones so far. Actually, I was just raiding some orchards yesterday where we have some commercial trials, and I was seeing a fair amount of disease, both fruits and on the leaves.
Okay. So let's talk about some of those. I had asked you for a few of them that are kind of top on your list, and you had some things with strawberries. Now, those are more June, but there's still things that can go wrong with them this time of year, right?
Yeah, this is actually was a little surprising to me. This is been one of the biggest phone calls and probably emails I've received this past summer was about strawberry diseases. And usually I'm dealing with fruit diseases, but unfortunately this year I think a lot of growers suffered with both root and crown rot diseases, diseases on the underground parts of the plant, which for the most part we don't often think about, right? We're excited about the fruits, the things we can eat, and we're not thinking about the parts underground. But I think, as we all know, they play an important role in keeping the plant thriving. And unfortunately, a lot of growers are seeing plant decline due to, I think, soils that are just holding more moisture. So we're seeing more fungal diseases, more oomycete diseases in the roots and the crown tissue. And unfortunately, this can lead to total plant collapse and decline, where growers are actually having to pull out these plants, which reduces production. And we've heard more about that this year.
Oh, yeah, that's a shame because usually a strawberry plant lasts quite a few years, doesn't it?
Yes, it absolutely can. And I think that's maybe the tough part with some of these diseases is that these pathogens actually overwinter in the soil, right? So because that plant's there, the roots tissues are still available. And then, of course, that soil's there helping support those roots. And if the pathogen's able to survive, it can survive on the plant tissue for multiple years.
Ugh. So what does that look like? I mean, you're not going to be digging around looking for it. So how do you see it on the top part of the plant?
Yeah, really good question. So I typically think of two big times when we see indications that you might be dealing with a root or crown rot disease. The first is when the plants are maybe experiencing a bit more heat than they have. So right in the spring, things are cool, things are starting off really well. As temperatures start to rise, that puts a bit of stress on the plant. So that kind of big stress event, oftentimes we see plant decline, and one of the first things I look for is a root or crown rot issue. And then the second period, which is arguably the most exciting and important period, is when that plant starts to put on fruit. And as those fruit develop, that's in some ways a stress to the plant as well. And as those fruits develop, we can sometimes see collapse or decline of those plants that have already been infected by root and crown rot. So really looking for those big events in the plant's life. If you're seeing some decline at those periods, that might indicate something going on below ground.
So when that happens, then do we dig up one just to check it to see? And if that's the case, what will we see?
Absolutely. Yep, that's the best thing you can do. You can pull that plant up, make sure that you get both that root and crown tissue. And one of your best tools in the field is probably going to be a small pocket knife. And that will allow you to cut into the root and crown tissue. And what you're looking for, a healthy plant's going to have white roots. It's going to have a white crown tissue. Anytime we see something ranging from orange to brown to black, that's typically indicative of a disease. So if you're seeing that color change from that white healthy to brown black, that's usually indicative of some type of crown or root issue.
And then if we do have it, dig it up and get rid of it?
Yeah, unfortunately, because you've got that root system impacted, that plant likely will not be able to recover from that disease. And so you're going to want to remove that plant, look at the nearby plants, and then ultimately think about some future rotations of non-strawberry or non-host crops, right? Because you might still have that inoculum in the soil. So it's a very kind of both short-term and long-term management approach.
Okay, well, fingers crossed you don't find any of that, but that's what you do if you do find it. Next, you had mentioned some problems with apple leaves.
Yeah, so there's kind of a new disease in apple, although the ironic part is it's not new. I think it's probably well over 100 years old, but it's kind of new to us because it's really starting to rear its ugly head. And both commercial apple production, but also I see it on plenty of neighborhood malus species when walking my dog. And it's called Marsanina leaf blotch or leaf blotch. Oftentimes that's what growers will refer to it as. And it's quite diagnostic. This is actually a really great time of year to see it because the leaves start to turn bright yellow. And within that bright yellow on the leaf, we start to see kind of black to purplish blotches. And that's typically where the fungus is growing. In really severe situations, almost the whole tree can turn yellow, or a large chunk of the leaves on different branches will turn yellow. So it's quite diagnostic, and it's quite devastating to the tree in that it can actually cause the leaves to fall prematurely, so a lot sooner than they're supposed to fall in the autumn season. So we're seeing a lot more of that in apple over the last couple of seasons.
And how is that going to affect the fruit?
Great question. So if you have fewer leaves on the tree, right, that's less kind of photosynthetic material that the tree is able to utilize to benefit those growing and developing fruits. And then really, I think what we're seeing is it's going to have longer term impacts. So when those leaves fall prematurely due to disease, what we end up is with blind wood, so wood that's not bearing any leaves. And that makes them a little bit less hardy going into winter, right? We know these apple trees need to go through an overwintering period before they're producing for us that following season. And if they're losing leaves too early, that winter hardiness is going to get reduced. And so that's going to have some more longer term impacts on the trees.
Okay, it's definitely something to look for. And if we do find it, is there something we can do?
Yeah, that's the tough part. It's so common. I think most people will find it now that hopefully I've turned folks' eyes to the different symptoms. In a backyard setting, there's not too much you can do. I'd say the best tool you have is quite similar to the folks who have maybe dealt with something like apple scab. Because the fungus lives inside of the leaves, when those leaves do fall, raking them up and removing them from under the tree is going to make a huge difference because that's where the fungus lives. So if you can remove the fungus, you can reduce the disease.
Okay. And can we compost those leaves, or should we bag them and get rid of them? Can we burn them?
Yeah, whatever way you can get rid of them is probably going to be the best thing. The main thing I tell folks is just get the leaves away from the tree.
Okay. Just away. We got an email from James. He has a 4-year-old aronia bush that set a lot of fruit this spring, and sadly in early June, most of the fruit yellowed, dried, and dropped off. Was this possibly drought and the aronias just needed water, or was this a disease process?
That's a great question. So it sounds like since all the fruit fell off and they turned yellow before that happened, To me, that sounds a little bit more like something related to environmental stress. So, as James mentioned, it could be potentially drought. That's certainly a possibility. Disease will typically impact a couple fruits, right, or a portion of the bush. Um, there are a few diseases that would likely impact the entire bush, but based on the timing and kind of the symptoms that James was seeing, my guess is it could actually be due to an environmental or potential physiological factor in the plant itself.
Okay, thanks for the email, James. If you've got a question about your fruit trees, your strawberries, raspberries, all that good stuff, give us a call, 800-642-1234, or you can send an email to talk@wpr.org. Now, the other thing that you sent was black rot on grapes, and then with grapes coming up for harvesting, that's got to be really important right now.
Yes, yep. I just actually had a phone call about this last week. So yeah, this is kind of the time of the year. Black rot is something I think that our commercial grape growers have certainly been dealing with over the last few seasons and has really emerged as a concern. I think we're used to dealing with powdery mildew and downy mildew, these really kind of prolific, visually clear diseases, but black rot I think has kind of unfortunately been lurking in the background. And the reason that we care about this disease is because of the impacts it has on the fruit itself. It simply does exactly as the name describes. It causes a literal rot of the fruit. And we'll start to see symptoms as early as July on green fruits. But as those infections progress, the fruit will actually become almost blackish brown in color, shrivel, and then can completely just cause and spread to the other clusters on that vine pretty quickly. So we're seeing a little bit more of that, but again, I think it's very much linked to kind of the warmer seasons we're having and some of the late season rains we're having as well.
And what does it look like?
So great question. So that initial infection period on the fruits themselves when they're still green, they look kind of like tan spots on the fruit. So they might look a little unassuming if you're not paying attention to grapes when they're still green, right? But they look kind of like a tannish to brown lesion on the fruit. As those fruits start to mature, they develop color and become purple, let's say, for those red varieties, they will start to have little tiny black dots on them. And this is actually part of the fungus itself. So you'll notice some black dots, and then you will likely notice a kind of brown black coloration on the fruits that will ultimately lead to them shriveling. So they'll kind of start to look very shriveled and dried out. And that's a pretty clear sign that you're dealing with black rot. And one of the interesting things about this particular pathogen is you can look for symptoms a little bit earlier, and this is what I'd recommend for folks growing grapes. We oftentimes worry about the fruit, as I was mentioning earlier in strawberry, but there are going to be some key signs before fruit's even formed on grape, and that's going to be on the leaves. So when the leaves start to get little brown lesions on them, that's oftentimes the first signs that you're dealing with black rot. The same way that you might see the brown lesion on the fruit, they're going to form on leaves first for the most part. So you can catch it early and actually probably institute a little bit more preventative practice if you're able to catch it early on the leaves.
Okay, so what does that preventative practice look like?
Excellent. Yep. So preventative practice is going to look like scouting pretty regularly those fruits if you start to see symptoms on the leaves, right? So walking through, keeping an eye on things.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I always like to emphasize is it's really easy to just walk past some grapevines and look at the grapes growing closest to you. I encourage folks to peel back that canopy and look close to the woody tissue. That's kind of a dark, humid area where pathogens thrive. So don't just look at the fruit that's nearest to you. Dig through that canopy and look for fruit for some of those symptoms. If you're starting to see those symptoms form or you have a really dense canopy, things like shoot thinning, right, removing some of those shoots and leaves to allow for more air circulation in the canopy is really going to help reduce what we would call a conducive environment for that disease. And then if you do start to see infected clusters, you can remove those. That will help reduce the overall inoculum load in your grapevines. It might not necessarily prevent spread to other clusters, but that will help you reduce overall inoculum. So.
Okay, yeah. And once you see the grapes, they turn into little mummies, right? They call them mummies.
Yes, exactly. Yes, little mummified fruits, right? Which is a great way to describe them because they truly look like that, almost very Halloween-esque.
They do. Yeah, so you'll know you have them, but yeah, get rid of them. We have a call from Pam in St. Charles, Minnesota. Go right ahead, Pam.
Hi there. I have a pear tree that has pear scab, and I have 4 pear trees, but I have one tree that I'm afraid is affecting the rest of the orchard. and I'm getting it cut down this fall, and I've treated it. Last year I treated it 4 times. I've treated it many times each year with neem oil, and this year it did not flower, so I thought I was lucky, and I thought, well, maybe it won't affect the other trees, but it did give me 3 pairs, and I could see those 3 pairs had the black velvet of pear scab, and so I'm afraid it's going to transfer, and I'm wondering, what can I do to keep that from happening?
Great question. Yeah, so pear scab is actually quite similar to apple scab. So a lot of the same management principles are the same. I would say in your situation with just a few pear trees, the biggest emphasis I can give you is going to be focused on sanitation. That's going to be the big thing that you can do. By sanitation, I mean removing those fruits that are showing those infections and removing any leaves that are showing infections too. So whether that's when the leaves fall, raking them up and making sure you get them away from the trees. That inoculum's already starting in the trees, so it's not so much an external source we're trying to manage, it's managing the fruits and the leaves that you already have producing. So I would also, again, encourage you, if you have pruning practices for that pear tree, to also do some pruning to increase airflow. Scab tends to like kind of a moist environment, so the more we can allow for more airflow in any canopy, that's going to reduce stress as well on the trees.
Pam, are you cutting the tree down because of the scab, or is there a different reason?
No, I'm cutting it down because the scab.
Okay. Do you think, Les, is that just a little maybe too, if she did some of the pruning, maybe that would help her to save the tree?
Yeah, I think normally for something like scab, we wouldn't recommend tree removal. It's something that can usually be managed through sanitation practices, sometimes some chemical sprays as well. But usually removal of the tree won't necessarily, it certainly could fix the problem, but I think it's probably a pretty aggressive route to go. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that.
Okay, well, think about it, Pam. Save the tree. Thanks for the call. We appreciate it. One of the other things that we tend to see a lot is fire blight. Are you seeing much of that this year?
Yes, unfortunately we are. Fire blight is one of the most devastating diseases of apple trees, and I think anyone who has an apple tree who has dealt with fire blight knows and understands that too painfully well. We have seen it a little bit this season, and again, I think conditions were quite conducive in the spring for that, unfortunately. So for folks who are unfamiliar with it, fire blight is really well named. It quite literally looks like a fire move through your tree. It causes kind of brown to black shoot death, and it can move quite rapidly as well. So we always recommend that folks prune out strikes when you see them in the tree. So strikes are just that, the shoots that have those symptoms. But it can also cause a blossom infection as well, which is typically when we institute most of the management, because those open flowers present an opportunity for that bacterium to get in.
Okay. Any other late summer and fall diseases that we should be looking out for, especially, like our apple trees, pear trees, that type of thing, or grapes?
Yep, I'd say the other disease that I got a glimpse of yesterday, as we just kind of dealt with some rain in Madison, is top of mind for me, and that's bitter rot of apple. Bitter rot is especially common on certain varieties, so Honeycrisp is a great example of that. But this particular disease is caused by a fungus, and it causes really distinct lesions on the fruit themselves. And oftentimes we see it right around harvest, right as we're kind of hoping for this perfect fruit, we see this horrific brown-looking lesion that starts to form on the fruit. And actually, if you were to cut that fruit open, you can actually see that brown tissue moving towards the center or the core of the apple. So it's quite a devastating disease. It's not superficial like we might see with pseudoblotch or fly speck. This disease actually interferes with the tissue integrity of apple fruits.
Now, when we see some of these diseases, obviously it doesn't look good on the fruit, but can we cut them out? Can we still eat the fruit? Can we use it for applesauce?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, you can still process a lot of these fruits. I would say the biggest limiting factor is if the entire apple fruit itself is rotted, and that's pretty easy to find out with your first bite or your first cut. Hopefully it's your first cut and not your first bite. those fruits aren't going to hold up as well. But yeah, a lot of the diseases we see, so even something like apple scab, sooty blotch, fly speck, they're relatively superficial. So you can remove that piece of infected skin. You can still eat the apple. You can make a sauce. You can make a juice. Yeah, apples are quite resilient fruits.
There's lots of options out there, so just because it doesn't look pretty doesn't mean you have to get rid of it. And as far as for fall cleanup, which will be coming up a little sooner than later, what should we be doing to make sure that we keep our fruit plants and trees, that we can help prevent some of those diseases come spring?
Yeah, this is a really great question and already a great time to start thinking about it. And this goes for your apple trees, your grapevines, your aronia bushes, any of these fruit crops, especially for fungal diseases. Sanitation, I'm going to say that word again because it's incredibly important, right? One of the most important principles of managing plant diseases is being able to reduce that initial inoculum. And because we're dealing with these perennial systems where things overwinter and they start fresh for us again in the spring, we want to remove as much pathogen as possible. So for an apple grower or grape grower or other small fruit grower, what that looks like is sanitizing. So removing leaves that previously had fungal infections, getting them out of your growing area. Also, Jill mentioned removing some of those mummies too, and those are really easy to spot, especially on something like grapevine, but also apple, because those can harbor a lot of different fungal pathogens. So just removing infected tissue in the fall so that you can get that out of the growing area and start fresh that next season.
And again, just to get rid of them, it doesn't matter what you do with it. Just make sure it's not near the trees or the plants.
Exactly. Yep. The further away, the better. And in some cases, if you've got a lot of trees or a lot of bushes, even just getting them down to the ground is sometimes good enough. It's better than in the canopy of the tree, but I say the further, the better. And I know this is especially a thing for something like fire blight, where you're actually pruning out branches, right? That's a little different than pulling mummies or raking leaves. So again, just getting them down to the ground is going to be a lot more important than just leaving them in the canopy of the tree. But again, the further away you can get it, the better. Those branches can even be mulched. That's certainly an option as well. I see folks doing, and we don't have a lot of evidence to say that that's going to cause much of a risk because you're breaking down that tissue.
Sure, especially if it's hot mulch. You don't have to worry about it as much. Now, you mentioned pruning. With our fruit trees and bushes, what's the best time to do that to avoid, diseases and also to avoid cutting off those buds for next year?
Yeah, great question. I'd say in terms of managing diseases, it's really tempting to see an infected branch or something and then cut it off immediately. And typically that's what we would recommend, but there are some instances where that's not the best choice. If fire blight's one in particular where you have to be really careful because we know that bacterial produces a lot of ooze, so you don't want to be cutting into ooze and then spreading that to other trees. So in general, a lot of your dormant pruning is going to be the best choice for you. So flagging branches now that aren't looking too good, targeting those in the winter during that dormant pruning period is going to be critical. And then in terms of thinking about that timeline, the other thing to keep in mind if you're pruning when it's still a little warm outside is avoiding rain. Give yourself a buffer against rain. Rain is what's going to be bringing those fungal pathogens in and can infect fresh pruning wound cuts. So you want to prune, the drier, the better.
And it's important to clean the tools that you're using in between.
Yeah, so there's been some recent research in that area, and I guess the short answer is not as important as we thought it was.
Oh, good.
I know, it's kind of exciting, right? Because it's quite time consuming.
It
But we've
is.
actually found that you don't necessarily need to clean your pruning shears even for something like fire blight. The exception is if you're cutting into ooze, which I'm going to tell you I don't recommend at all for fire blight. If you see ooze, just stay away. But in general, it's actually more important just to get the branches out of the tree that are impacted versus really focusing on sterilizing those pruning shears.
Okay, well, we'll leave it at that. Don't cut into ooze, folks. We've been talking to Leslie Holland. She is an associate professor and extension specialist of fruit crop pathology at UW-Madison. Leslie, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise with us today. We appreciate that.
Thanks, Jill.
You bet. So stick around. We are going to be talking about bonsai. I'm sure you've looked at those wonderful little trees in dishes and wondered, how can you do that? Is it easy? Not necessarily, but we'll tell you how. So stick with us. If you've got any questions, you can give us a call, 800-642-1234. And of course, you can send an email. Let's talk at WPR.org. Stay with us. We'll be back after a sec. Viewing a bonsai tree is like entering a magical world where you're a giant looking down at a beautiful tree. This is Garden Talk. I'm Jill Nadeau. And up next, we're going to talk about bonsai and what you should know if you'd like to create one. Back with us is Kevin Stoeveken. He's the owner of Wisco Bonsai, a company that caters to the hobbyist. What would you like to know about caring for one? Are you wondering what kinds of trees work best? Well, give us a call with your questions at 800-642-1234, or you can send an email to talk@wpr.org. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Jill.
Thank you so much for being with us. I know you're on vacation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, not a big one, just up in Waupaca to visit my grandsons, and I'm actually right now sitting at beautiful Hartman Creek State Park for this interview.
Oh, lovely. I guess you can't complain about that too much.
No, not at all.
So what got you interested in bonsai?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I've kind of always had some cool house plants and that kind of thing, but I was also very into sculpture. I had a sculpture studio and that sort of thing, and just by serendipity, I happened to catch literally a glimpse of a bonsai tree one day, and it just knocked me out. And I was able to then combine several passions into one, and that's really the short story.
Sure. Well, that makes a lot of sense because it is a combination of the two, growing and sculpture. But if you don't happen to have a sculpture background like you can still work on bonsai.
Oh, bonsai can be as easy as someone wants, or as difficult. And as difficult can get very difficult, but easy can be very easy.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good to know because they are magical. They do attract your attention. And I think people would love to have one. Like when you see one, I was just at the state fair not too long ago, and there was a wonderful display of the bonsai there, and there were so many people around it, and it just like, oh, look at this tiny little this and tiny little that, and like you said when I emailed you, bonsai is not a house plant. So let's start with that from the very beginning. So tell us why people need to know that.
Well, most of my customers who have tried bonsai without any instruction or anything have just grabbed a tree from one of the big box stores. I won't name names. Yeah. A lot of times those are already dead or in the process of dying. But either way, they bring them home. They don't know any better, and they bring them into the house and because they want a house decoration. And these trees really need to be outside spring, summer, and fall in order to thrive. They can survive inside, but they'll never thrive. And if we want to apply bonsai techniques to them, they need to be thriving and in optimum health, and they won't have that inside.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we have to keep remembering this is a tree. Yes,
a tree, absolutely. Sometimes shrubs. We use shrubs too, but generally tree form.
Exactly. So how did you go from being interested in it and starting to do it to have a business?
I needed to finance my hobby for one thing, which was a hobby at that time. But the other thing was Japanese substrate. A lot of people use imported Japanese substrate. And the first thing I said was I refuse to do that. And I found many other things that we can use for great effect in growing our trees that does not have to be imported from Japan. So I started making substrate, and you can't buy the components in small quantities. So I started making substrate to sell, and that's what launched my business.
And you started with that, but you've, forgive the pun, branched out, right?
Yeah. I mean, once I started doing that, and that became very successful, then we moved to a better location, and I was able to build an actual shop, a physical shop, and have a proper garden. So that just slowly grew over the past 12 years. I've been doing it for 14 years, but the business has been in effect for almost 13 years because I needed to make substrate.
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot of people find themselves in business because of those kinds of things. It goes from a hobby to a business. It's Wisco Bonsai, and you are located
in Sussex. Sussex, Wisconsin, which is Waukesha County.
Sure, near Milwaukee, for those who are not familiar. And you do have a website, but you don't sell off the website. You do...
No.
But it does kind of show people what you carry.
Oh, yeah, everything. Those are all those exemplary pictures. The trees come and go so much. There's no point in putting a tree for sale on the website. It's just going to be gone before and I don't have time to monkey with all that. That's not why I'm into bonsai, is for the electronic end of it.
Well, and it's probably important for you to talk to people when they come in, just so they understand the basics and especially if they're new to the hobby.
Yeah. I offer it's called a Bonsai 101 thing, where for $25, someone can come in and I'll tell them as much as they can absorb within an hour of how to grow bonsai in Wisconsin. I don't waste time on history or other climates. It's all about what we can do here.
Sure, that makes sense. What's your favorite part about growing bonsai as a hobby?
Favorite part? Seeing them develop, seeing techniques that have been applied years ago or even last year come to fruition before my eyes.
Well, it's not quick though, right?
No. I mean, you can bend you can take a pine tree or a conifer, and you can throw a style on that tree all at once and have it really close to being finished. So that can go quick, but then the small branch ramification takes a long time. But you can take a big juniper and throw it into shape in one day, and it's going to look pretty dang cool.
Really?
Yeah. But then we need further interior growth and back budding and filling out after that step. So it'll look cool, but it'll take a while to get really good.
And well, let's just start with the basics now. For someone who doesn't know much about it, they've seen them, they're gorgeous. Well, first, who shouldn't have a bonsai? Maybe we should start there.
Well, maybe apartment dwellers, people who don't have someplace to have them. That's really what it boils down to. You can do with indoor lights, but for tropical material. But I don't deal in any tropical material. I just deal in things that grow well in Wisconsin. So yeah, I kind of avoid some of the pitfalls that come with growing indoor trees. So people who have indoor situations, they can get something to maybe enjoy, but it's going to be really hard to, quote unquote, do bonsai.
Okay. All right. So should somebody start with one that's already potted, or is it best to create your own?
Well, that depends on the time of year. Like, if people are going to want to get one, like right now, you can't repot anything right now into a pot. So things like conifers can be styled right now and then repotted next year. So it kind of depends on what time of year you're coming into it. Like this coming spring, and I do it every spring, I do a beginner bonsai where we take a juniper or some similar type tree out of the nursery pot and into its first bonsai pot. And that is the biggest skill that anyone can have, is getting that tree, the roots reduced, and into its first small container. Having that skill will take you quite a ways in your journey.
Because you are reducing that root system by a lot. Bonsai pots are very small.
Well, step those down. So if it's in, like, say, a 10-gallon nursery can, and we want to get it into a 1-gallon bonsai pot, that's going to take a couple subsequent repotting. So we knock it down to a size, and then a couple years later we can remove more roots So it's a kind of a gradual thing depending on how much you're starting with.
So it's basically the opposite of what we do with regular houseplants. So we want them to grow. So we take them from a small container to a larger one and to a larger one. But with the bonsai, we take it from a larger container down to a smaller one to a smaller one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But sometimes we do like we do with houseplants. If we have just a little stick in a pot, we might put it in something larger, and then something larger, and then something larger, and then later reduce it back down once our trunk gets thicker.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah, that can be kind of complicated sounding.
Well, it kind of depends on, we start with the trunk, and the branches can all be built afterward, but we got to really start with a trunk. So if you've got a skinny little trunk, blow it up, chop it down, and go from there.
Okay. Well, how do you select a tree species for this?
Any tree species can work. The only limitations are things like, for example, our sugar maples. Our sugar maples can have leaves the size of dinner plates.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anyone get those really down to bonsai size. And things we do with the trees really do reduce leaf size, like elms and other maples. We can do things to get that leaf smaller and smaller and smaller over time to be in scale with the tree. So our red maples, our sugar maples aren't very good at that. Our white pines are not really good at that. So it all depends on how small we can get the foliage to be in scale with the tree.
With a deciduous tree, they drop their leaves just like they would normally, right?
Absolutely.
And so what do you look for when you're selecting? You figured out what you want. Now you're going to go out and pick out one. So what are you looking for as far as the characteristics of that tree that would make a really good bonsai?
The trunk. Period. Full stop. The trunk. Unless you're going to grow the trunk out. But if I'm at a nursery or a bonsai show and I want something to start with, it's going to have the trunk at the diameter that I would like. Because once they're in a bonsai pot, that trunk doesn't grow much, but we can do a lot with growing branches and manipulating branches. So the trunk is really the starting point.
Okay.
Because everything else can be built on that.
Okay. So the size, does it the way it looks have anything to do with it?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So you want girth on the trunk, but having, depending on what kind of styles you're looking at, sometimes a very straight, upright, formal trunk is very nice for a stately tree that you might see out in the middle of a field without any environmental hazards happening to it. But sometimes you really want something that looks like it's gone through a struggle, and then you're looking for a gnarly, twisted, bent trunk.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're talking about bonsai trees today with Kevin Stoeveken. He's the owner of Wisco Bonsai. If you've got questions about how to care for one, what to look for, how to put one together, please give us a call, 800-642-1234. And of course, you can send us an email. That's talk@wpr.org. Okay, so we've got our tree, we've got it picked out, and say it's time to put it in its pretty pot, okay? How do we go ahead and select those?
Well, that's going to depend on the size of the tree. So in Japan, they have formulas saying if a tree is X number of centimeters in diameter, the pot should be this size.
Okay.
If the tree is X number of centimeters, I'm saying centimeters because they do this in Japan. If it's X number of centimeters tall, then it should be in a pot this wide, this deep. And I eschew all of that. What looks right, looks right. We don't need to complicate anything. But those who are interested in formulas and bonsai by numbers are welcome to follow the Japan technique, because they'll tell you how to build a tree into a nice little triangle.
Of
and
course.
all the dimensions will be correct.
Yes.
But here in North America, we've been developing our own bonsai style.
Okay. I mean, it is like a lot of things with Japanese design, it's about balance, right? I mean, is that still kind of the basis?
Sure. A lot of what they say makes sense, but when it becomes dogma, then I'm not as crazy about it. But yes,
Sure.
having your first lowest branch being your biggest branch is nice. It makes sense. It's a welcoming, and your branches should be smaller as they go up the tree and thinner. That just makes sense,
Yep.
No one's arguing with that.
Sure. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got our pot. Now you've got to put something in it. You were talking a little bit about it earlier, but what's actually in that media that you're using?
Well, the main thing is granular particles. So there's no dirt. My mix is comprised of 1/8 to 1/4 size particles of pumice, lava, haydite, and kiln-dried fir bark. With a little pinch of horticultural charcoal. I have a hard time with that one. Horticultural charcoal for just to sweeten up the pot a little bit. So that's my substrate mix. Very simple. Anyone's welcome to copy it. That's all the less I have to sell if they do. And then the other stuff, like the stuff from Japan, the akadama and things like that, and those are volcanic products. But they use them in Japan because they're cheap and plentiful.
Sure.
Neither one of which are they here.
Right.
They're expensive and hard to source. Really expensive. So, so we put it in something granular, and that's so that it drains a lot. Each particle grabs onto water and holds it and nutrients and releases it back to the tree in between waterings. And but every time we water, so much water runs through that pot because we have oversized drainage holes. It may seem wasteful, but that's actually good because as those particles are grabbing onto water, oxygen is also passing through that pot. And that's the big difference with bonsai versus houseplants is the aeration of the roots. Bonsai trees get way more aeration than anything in dirt, and that's just as important as water.
Well, you have fewer roots, so
No.
Okay.
So over time, we end up, even though we're reducing roots, what we're doing when we're repotting a tree is over time we get rid of the big fat anchory type roots. And every time we make a cut, every time we cut one of those fat roots, a network of fine roots come out of that and grow into the substrate because of what they're planted in. So we end up with a pot full of micro roots, which are far better than a pot full of fat roots.
That makes much more sense then.
Yes.
I see. Okay. And as far as the watering goes now, I believe you totally immerse the plant. Is that correct?
Nope. You can do that if you have a tree that's in dire need of repotting, it's root bound, you missed it, then you can soak that pot. No, we just just water over the top of the substrate.
Okay.
And again, if you soak the pot, you're not going to get that oxygen exchange.
Okay.
I mean, you can pick it up, let it drain out, and oxygen will get pulled through by gravity. But no, we water just from overhead, over the top of the substrate. We water it, come back, water it again. If I'm going down the bench, I'll water the whole bench, and I'll come back and do it again because it's drained out, and the particles can maybe grab a little more water. And that gets done kind of daily.
Okay. We got an email from Vic asking, what are some successful ways to overwinter deciduous and evergreen bonsai?
Hey, Vic. Well, here you go. Stick them in the garage. Simple as that. Yeah, stick them in the garage, stick them in a shed. Most of what you're going to get, like I'm going to assume that you're maybe starting with something you're digging up or getting from a nursery center. It's already hardy here in Wisconsin. We're zone 5, depending on where, maybe zone 4. I'm speaking southeastern Wisconsin, zone 5, 6, whatever. So anything that's a zone, 5 or 6, all the way down to, zone 2, is easily goes in the garage. Zone 2 stuff can just go on the ground, blocked from the wind. Things like, eastern white cedars are super hardy, and larches are super hardy. So overwintering those is pretty easy, but you also want to make sure that you water them occasionally in the winter. Not every day by any means, maybe every few weeks. Give them a good watering and check them. Or you can pile snow on top of the pot. And if the snow melts, then it took the water. If the snow's not melting, it wasn't able to take it. So.
And we don't have to worry about the roots freezing and.
Well, they can freeze and thaw.
Okay.
If it's a hardy tree. Okay. That's the big difference. You're not going to take say like maybe a Japanese maple and get away with that with.
Mm-hmm.
You have a little bit more protection for that. You might not want to let them freeze solid.
Okay.
But I will say that before I put away my deciduous and my evergreen or my conifers in the winter, I let them all get bit by a couple freezes.
Oh, okay.
And just to kick off dormancy. Because if you put them away in the garage and they haven't really gotten super cold yet, dormancy may have a hard time setting in because they are protected. So let them get bit a couple times, then put them away.
Well, that makes sense. And how do you know when
they don't need light? Sorry.
How do you know when it's time to take them back out?
When your temperatures are above freezing.
Above freezing. Okay.
Yeah. And so with your deciduous trees, once those buds open, they're going to want light. Otherwise, you're going to get really long internodes, being the space between leaves, as they reach for light. So once those buds start opening and showing, you really want to get them out in the light. I try to keep my deciduous and such as cold as possible for as long as possible because of all of our false start springs.
True. It seems to be happening a lot more lately.
Yeah, those late freezes are just awful. I've lost trees because of it. And I have a better system now for next year. Everything's on wheels.
Oh.
Wheel it in, wheel it out.
Yes, I think that a lot of people are going to be joining you with that for all kinds of things. So wonderful. Now let's get to the shaping part of it, because that's the whole fun part about a bonsai, and that's the key. Now, when you select your tree, do you have an idea of what that shape is going to look like at the end, or do you just kind of let it kind of flow as it grows?
Well, kind of both.
Okay.
So you have to be attracted to the tree in the first place. It's harder to take something that looks like nothing that you don't have any idea about. So you've already gotten an attraction to the tree for some reason. So as far as the future styling goes, you're going to work off of what that tree was kind of showing you when you first saw it, unless it's like a stick in a pot. I'm talking something that's got a little something to it.
Yeah.
And something attracted to you, then over time, we do let the tree just be a tree. So a lot of people like to graft and do other crazy things that I'm like, well, why would you buy a Maserati and put a Porsche engine in it? No, you don't got to graft it. Just use a different species then. That's just how I feel.
Sure.
Just let the tree be a tree for a while and embrace what attracted you to it in the first place, and add and subtract to that as time goes on.
Okay. And when does the wire, because you always notice the wire when you're looking at a bonsai, when does that come in?
Well, you want to wire the branches when you want to change their orientation or their direction. A straight branch isn't anywhere near as interesting as a branch with movement to it. And so we wire them for that, and then depending on the species, the wire can stay on. For deciduous trees, maybe only like a month before it starts cutting in. Some conifers, the wire might be on for 2 to 3 years before that branch will actually set.
Sure.
So it's kind of like when we break an arm and we set the arm. So we're tearing tissues, and once that tissue's healed, we can take the wire off.
Gotcha. We've got Scott and Elko with a really quick question because we're just about out of time. Go ahead, Scott.
Really?
What is the best fertilizer for bonsai trees?
Okay.
Well, for conifers, I like to use something with a little acid to it. So there are several mass market brands out there. I love Dr. Earth's acid lovers, and that's for conifers, maples, azaleas, and then everything else, any all-purpose but granular organic fertilizer is the way to go. If people want to use liquid, you can. You can use any kind of Miracle Grow, but you do it weekly, meaning a week solution once a week. And by week solution, I mean about half strength. So half strength once a week, weekly. Easy to remember.
Okay, weekly.
Yeah, most people have Miracle Grow on their shelf for their house plants. Perfectly fine to use. But a better option is the organic granular fertilizer.
Okay. Thank you so much, Scott. We appreciate that call. And Lisa emailed wondering, are bonsai trees normally 40 to 60-foot trees in nature?
Yeah, if we set one free back into the wild, it will do what a tree does.
It'll grow.
Yep, it will grow.
Oh my gosh. Well, that went really, really fast. Kevin, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about bonsai. It's such a beautiful art, and we appreciate you sharing that with us.
Would I have a time for 2 quick plugs for the local the bonsai clubs?
Yes.
People should know that there's bonsai clubs around for them to find. There's Fox Valley, Green Bay has a club, Milwaukee has the Milwaukee Bonsai Society, Madison has the Badger Bonsai Society. Lots of resources out there for people to check it out.
Yeah, and that's the best place to learn too. So if you're interested, check it out. All right, we've been talking.
The best place.
All right, thank you, Kevin. We've been
All right, take care.
You too. We've been talking to Kevin Stoeveken. He's the owner of Wisco Bonsai, and if you look it up, I think he has lots of info on his website. Also, just a shout out to Jeff Robbins for being our technical director today, and for Claire Neipert for being my technical director. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back again next week.